asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Web fire, math, evil scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, set ready for that ghost kill.
Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of The Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. And before we even jump into tonight's show, just kind of a spoiler alert, I was definitely black-pilled putting tonight's episode together. So I don't actually have a white pill or a meme for today. So I'd love for you guys to let me know in the chat. Remind me of some of the white pill stories you've recently seen. And let me know what maybe some of your recent favorite memes are in regards to what's going on. So tonight, what we're going to be talking about, obviously, is I'll update you guys in regards to the Emergencies Act. If somehow you didn't see that, it did pass, sadly, here in Canada. And I do think that that is a serious turning point in the trajectory of Canada, as well as it's going to be something we're going to look back on as historic here in Canada. Now, the context of how we look back on this historic moment will truly be dictated by who writes history. And I've got no doubt right now that the Liberal government is very certain that they'll be the ones writing history, and hence their constant rhetoric, demonization of their political enemies, the desire to paint everyone as a racist, misogynist, as anti-science. That's their choice and their reason for focusing so much on, one Confederate flag and one Nazi flag during the initial start of the protest. And again, we're going to cover a lot tonight. I'm going to be updating you guys on some of the mainstream media's not misinformation, but certainly trying to mislead a lot of Canadians in regards to what's going on with bank account freezes. And we're really going to explore the importance of language in this one, because I think that the Canadian government and the RCMP, in my humble opinion, are purposefully misleading Canadians. And if they're not, then I don't understand why they're approaching these bank freezes in the manner and the language that they are. So we're going to explore that. And then otherwise, I've got a course of blue pill, red pill, black pill, and then clown pills for us tonight. And just want to say I really appreciate those of you guys that are always in the comment section. And it definitely warms my heart when I see, usually it's Peter, Kyle, and Aislinn are some of the first commenters in the YouTube channel. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you, guys. But enough of my kind of preamble. Let's jump into tonight's show. So again, we hit a very monumental moment in Canadian history yesterday. And so what I want to start off here, and again, reminder as always, links in the video description down below to everything we're going to discuss tonight. I don't want this to be the end of your fact-finding journey. I really do just want this show to be the jumping off point where you guys take this and go and learn more about what's going on in the world, right? Use this as a springboard or an opportunity to go down the rabbit hole. And so the first article I just want to share, this is from Blacklock's Reporter, and it literally just breaks down for you exactly how each individual member of parliament voted in regards to the Emergencies Act. And again, it was passed, 185 to, was it 151? I'm sure we'll cover it later on in the show, but essentially, I just want to highlight it for you. Everyone voted on party lines from what I saw. So Conservatives and Bloc, they were against it. They were the nays. And we had the Liberals and the NDP voting yay. One thing that was interesting that I didn't see anyone covering in the mainstream media is I believe there's two members of the Green Party, or at least when I was quickly skimming this list before the show, I saw two members of the Green Party, and one voted yay and one voted nay. And just a reminder, in case you guys didn't look at the list, Elizabeth May was a yay. So I think this is important. And I hope that at some point in time, we get to hold these politicians accountable. And I hope that, there's consequences to their choice to essentially support the tyrant that is Justin Trudeau in our Canadian government. And, I guess monologue before I get deeper into tonight's show. I understand that right now it's honestly difficult to even separate fact from fiction. And, it's very easy to want to fall down or fall victim. Definitely both sides are doing it and both sides are capable of doing it. It does none of us any good, really, in my opinion. And I'm going to try and dial myself back I really do believe that this is a historic moment in Canadian history, and right now it's not for the better. But let's keep rolling through tonight's stories. So the next one, this is from Blacklock's Reporter, and I just want to highlight this because circling on social media yesterday, there was a Liberal MP was sharing what was deemed to be a leaked list of Conservative MPs that purportedly had donated to the trucker convoy. Now, several of the Conservative MPs on that list stated that was misinformation or just factually incorrect. It seems like the Liberals still continue to just want to push that. One thing I want to say here is it almost feels like we're having the wrong argument in regards to this. I don't see why it would be wrong for members of parliament to donate to individual protests or movements, right? And if that is the case, then I think that we need to look at just banning them outright from ever supporting any sort of protest. I don't understand why we should be demonizing this protest in particular. But what I did want to highlight is something that I don't think a lot of Canadians realize. So while this list was kind of pointed out during the debate on passing the Emergencies Act, one Liberal MP essentially, he was trying to paint the Conservatives as having a bias here because he was saying that they donated to it. And so because of that, they were biased in regards to this vote. Now, let's be honest here. From the language we heard coming out of Justin Trudeau and his party, I think that it's pretty easy to say that both sides are going to be biased to some extent. And again, I'm not even sure if that's necessarily how to interpret that, right? Like how important is understanding that bias in regards to whether they vote yay or nay on all this? Because let's be honest, both parties seem to just vote along their lines, and that's that. There's no, like, the MPs aren't actually doing their job by simply towing the party line. And the fact that Justin Trudeau was trying to turn this into a vote of confidence, which, I think by default it naturally was, but the fact that that was essentially used as a blunt force object to get the NDPs in line, I think is really concerning and honestly shows that the NDPs are really nothing more than Liberal backbenchers at this point in time. But I want to highlight MP Lobb pointing to the Commons door challenged Lemoreau to repeat his remarks outside. MPs are immune from civil claims for defamation within the House of Commons, but not outside the chamber. So essentially, MP Lobb was saying like, hey, you're saying I'm on this list. I'm not actually a donator to it. This is defamation. Step outside and say that. And so his exact quote was, if he wants to go outside that door and read those names off, I'm sure there will be many lawyers calling him this week. Sid Lobb, I will guarantee you that. So again, it's just important that we understand the context or some of the rules that our politicians are playing within, because it can be really easy for the media to jump on this and say that, during the debate, it was brought up that the Conservatives, a large group of Conservatives, had donated to the trucker convoy and this biases them, yada, yada, yada. But if the average person reading that article doesn't understand that technically MPs can't be sued for defamation for things they say on the floor, but they can be for things they say outside of Parliament, that's important to understand. So just wanted to highlight that for everyone. Now, just wanted to, again, bring to your attention, True North, I think, has done some of the best reporting in Canada on what's going on with the Trucker Freedom Convoy. So a link to their recap of day 30 in the video description down below. And now, I'd be shocked if most of you haven't seen this, but I still think this is worth exploring and discussing. So Canada, the Fanatics rule. This MP claims the cry "honk" on social media is an acronym for Hail Hitler. Utterly deranged and dangerous. I fear for Canada. And I'll let you hear what she exactly says.
How many guns need to be seized? How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler, do we need to see by these protesters on social media?
Straight up, this lady is deranged. I don't know what else to tell you. Again, that's obviously my biased take on it. But if you think that honk honk is an acronym for Hail Hitler and that everyone that tweeted honk honk or everyone that honked their horns during the protests are somehow white supremacists or have been tricked by white supremacists into supporting white supremacy, like legit, we don't even live in different realities at this point in time, like different planes of existence. Like there's not a single atom in my body that agrees with that statement. you're completely out to lunch and delusional. And so if you guys want to read an article kind of going deeper into this is from True North, but again, just kind of highlighting the Liberal MP and kind of going through, some of the loose arguments and some of the details in regards to how we kind of found ourselves in that situation. And so if we're going to say that honk honk is in fact a essentially, an acronym for Hail Hitler, at this point in time, I think we can read into any type of symbolism. So when I look at the flag of the city of Ottawa, that's it right here, this looks like a 666. So does that mean that the city of Ottawa is essentially just a accumulation of devil worshippers that are wearing the mark of the beast? I mean, based upon her logic, I think it's pretty safe to say those are 3 6s as far as I'm concerned. So, there we are. Again, it's really easy to want to jump to conclusions and read too much into things. I'm sure that what they were trying to do with this flag is make it an O and make it somehow, dynamic by making it more than just an O. Surely not everyone in Ottawa is literally a worshiper of the devil, but probably most of the politicians. Now this one's from Stephen Punwazi, and again, I think he's an amazing follow on Twitter if you guys aren't following him. But in Canada, over the past week, the word freedom is racist. Honking your horn is racist. There are 2 groups: people who are exploited and frustrated, and dangerous people trying to capitalize on them. Canada is making a huge mistake right now. I completely agree with this sentiment. Yeah, in a group of 50,000 plus people, will you find some individuals that are deranged, that are evil? Yes. But literally, I don't think you could find a single group of 50,000 human beings and not be able to at least find one rotten apple in that group. But that doesn't actually mean that just each and every single person then in that group of 50,000 should immediately be written off. So I encourage you guys, go read Stephen's whole thread here. It's definitely worth the read. Now, kind of switching gears, but still talking about the Emergencies Act and the trucker freedom protest. So ADL finds 1,100 people donated to both Canada Freedom Convoy and January 6th demonstration. This has been touted a lot in the mainstream media, and as far as I'm concerned, this is just a giant nothing burger. Again, I don't understand. We've never gone this deep into looking into the history of people that donate to political movements or to individual protests. And honestly, I don't care the side of your politics. This is just a dangerous, slippery slope, and we should just be past this, right? This sort of division will only continue to compound over time, and we're only going to see this used against more and more political opponents. And understand that the way democracy works is it usually is a pendulum, and it has a tendency to swing from one extreme to another. Right now, we've kind of swung very hard in the socialist, statist, almost communist sort of regime. But there's a good chance that we're going to see some sort of counter push on this in the future here in Canada. Again, I don't want to see Black Lives Matter protesters or any similar movements being doxxed, being attacked, and then being associated immediately with the most extreme individuals of that movement. Again, this honestly just does no one any good. And it seems like both the mainstream media and politicians have no interest in trying to heal the divides that they're creating. They're in fact doubling down at every single opportunity they get at this point in time, and they should honestly just all be ashamed of themselves. Just want to highlight this because it was not getting any coverage in the mainstream media. But yesterday, during the actual leading up to the Emergencies Act vote in Parliament, as well as after the fact, there was actually people protesting in Jagmeet Singh's individual riding at his office, and they were putting up signs and stuff, essentially, claiming that he's a puppet of Trudeau. And again, I certainly don't think that the NDP or Jagmeet have acted in accordance with the politics and the policies that they claim that they represent. But again, that's just my personal opinion. This one's from the Post-Millennial. Mayor of Ottawa suggests selling vehicles confiscated from freedom protests. How can we keep the tow trucks and the campers and the vans and everything else that we've confiscated and sell those pieces of equipment? If you want to radicalize protesters further, I think that this is the right choice to make. If you're actually trying to heal the division and, try and bring these people back into society, this is not the right move whatsoever. And again, it will set an absolutely dangerous precedent, right? At some point in time, are we just going to accept that any enemy of the regime, that any individual that dares to protest, and that protest doesn't make the approved list of protests that the government will dictate, it seems like, in the near future, are we just going to essentially allow those people to be sold into like debt slavery, right? Are we just going to completely financially destroy them, arrest them and hold them without charges and without due process? Because that's the trajectory we're headed on right now. I know it's easy to think for a lot of people that, oh no, it's just we're only applying this to the extreme elements of the trucker convoy protest. No, once this precedent is set, we will continue to see this used again and again and again. I mean, look at any temporary measurement that almost any government has ever implemented, and it never gets rolled back willingly. It always ends up resulting in a real fight, and oftentimes like a real division in society occurs because of it. So again, I think it's very dangerous, the direction we're headed in here. Now, this is something that's really important in my opinion. So if you guys have just kind of been half tuning in, this is the time to pay attention. I'm not going to say this is misinformation, but this is certainly misleading, in my opinion, the way politicians, the way the RCMP, and the way mainstream media is lining up the narrative in regards to what's happening with freezing of accounts. So first of all, I want to highlight here a statement from the RCMP, and then we'll jump to a couple others. But this was from Matthew Iglesias. I've read a lot of Americans who are outraged the Canadian government applied financial sanctions to people who donated to the anti-vaccine protests, which again, immediately already, he's signaling that it's anti-vaccine rather than anti-mandate, which I don't think is done in good faith. But this apparently didn't happen. Again, already, apparently. Should make people happy, I suspect, but will make them matter somehow. But I'm going to read the statement exactly. Statement on the freezing of financial accounts. Statement. Under the Emergencies Economic Measure Order, Emergencies Act, the list that was provided to financial institutions included identities of individuals who were influencers in the illegal protest in Ottawa and owners and or drivers of vehicles who did not want to leave the area impacted by the protest. At no time did we provide a list of donors to financial institutions. We are now working with the banks to build a process to address the accounts that were frozen. So again, these are two different statements here. The RCMP is saying we did not provide a list of donors. And whenever we see what Chrystia Freeland and any politician or member of parliament from the Liberals are stating, again, they're referring to the fact the RCMP didn't provide it. But one, if you actually look at how this was rolled out, we're left with a lot of confusion around, well, it sounds like the banks were given a mandate to be proactive in this regards. So one, the banks in theory could freeze the accounts without having to be condoned by the RCMP or receive the list. Two, politicians in theory or other parts of the administration in theory could provide lists in order to have this frozen. We've also got anecdotal stories from, at this point in time, dozens of Canadians that claim that all they did was donate and they're having their accounts frozen. Now, again, could all these anecdotal stories be wrong? Yes. But I think it's important to say no one is unequivocally saying that no, under no circumstances did a single Canadian citizen have their account frozen simply because they donated to this protest. Not one politician, not the RCMP, not the bankers, no one is actually coming out and saying that. If you came out and said that unequivocally, that would actually allow us to trust you. Instead, it feels like you're using very specific language in order not to lie, but you're also avoiding telling the truth. And so personally, black-pilled version of Matt, I suspect that months or years from now, we're going to hear like, oh, a few accounts accidentally got frozen, but it wasn't widespread. Don't blow it out proportions. But again, understand that right now your mainstream media, which you give millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to every year, and the CBC, which you give over $1 billion a year to, is very specifically massaging the narrative to make it seem like under no circumstances could this possibly happen. It absolutely could happen, and it does appear to be happening. It just doesn't appear that it's because the RCMP gave a list of donors to the banks. So again, we've already seen that when implementing the Emergencies Act, the Liberal Party actually used in their documentation, their 14-page document, they used a CBC article which used the list of donors and reached out to donors and essentially was stating how a lot of foreign influence was involved with this list, right? So again, language is really important in regards to this story because I can't help but feel that they're specifically not lying, but also not telling the truth. And that's how you continue to erode the trust in our politicians and our institutions and administration. Is the government going after any donor, including small donors, asked a reporter. It's important for all of us to be very, very careful to get our facts exactly right, said Minister Freeland. The RCMP has given to the financial institution names of leaders and organizers of the protest and people whose trucks were part of occupations and blockades, said Freeland. That is the only information, according to the RCMP, that the RCMP has given to financial institutions. So again, this is like a non-answer in my opinion. Let's say that I'm completely wrong here. Again, this was a missed opportunity for the Liberals at a minimum and the administration to actually just come out and forcefully and unequivocally state under no circumstances is this happening or could it happen? But instead, they're essentially saying, hey, the RCMP definitely didn't do this. Okay, but did anyone else do this? Are you doing this? Are other departments of the government doing this? Are banks proactively doing this, right? That's important for us to understand. And as well, why is it that we're hearing about all these Bitcoin addresses? Were those all from just influencers that had their accounts flagged? Because again, it seems very wishy-washy, their approach to trying to, remove the fear of the average Canadian citizen in regards to what's going on. We already shared a few stories of people that at least claimed to have had their accounts frozen over yesterday's episode. I'm not going to rehash those, but here's another one. TD Bank freezes Saskatchewan farmer's account for $500 Convoy donation. This is from the Western Standard. Link in the video description down below. Now we've got an article from the RCMP. RCMP banks in Ottawa say Convoy protest donors won't have accounts frozen after viral tweet said otherwise. But again, actually go and read at the language. And all it is the RCMP saying, at no time did we provide a list of donors to the financial institutions, the RCMP said in a statement. Then when we're talking about Chrystia Freeland, again, she's referring to the fact that the RCMP, under no circumstances, did they do this. But again, we're not asking if the RCMP did this. We're asking if this is possible to happen. We're asking if this is happening, not if the RCMP is the one in the driver's seat causing this to occur. And that's where I think that, again, at a minimum, this is a failure to effectively communicate with the Canadians. And more likely, in my opinion, this is actually just this is not lying while still avoiding to tell the truth. Now, I want to share this video. This is just a clip from Dr. Peterson. He definitely seems distressed in this video. He's telling the truth. But at the same time, I don't think we know the full picture here, but this seems like a very strange situation. So I'm just going to let you guys listen to what Dr. Peterson has to say.
This morning, I don't know what to make of all of this because it's happening so quickly. I can't believe the state to which the country is degenerated. I've been in contact with a reliable source within the Canadian military, and he told me today by email that if I had any sense, I'd take my money out of the Canadian banks because the situation is far worse than I've been informed. And this morning, I don't know what to make.
So essentially, that's from Dr. Peterson saying that he was warned by someone in the Canadian military that he should withdraw his cash from his Canadian bank accounts. Now, again, I think it's important to distinguish the fact that Dr. Peterson arguably could be viewed as a significant influencer and supporter of the Freedom Convoys because he's been an outspoken critic of Justin Trudeau and his government and his entire approach to dealing with the protesters. So I'm not saying that this necessarily applies broad strokes to every single person, but I do think it's very concerning to see Dr. Peterson having to even think about this shit. So that's kind of my take. Do with it what you will. Now, this is another one going around. We touched upon it yesterday, but I think it's worth repeating. A regulator in Canada warns crypto exchanges not to promote self-custodial wallets, report. So the Ontario Securities Commission sent tweets from Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong and Kraken CEO Jesse Powell to the Canadian police. And we discussed it yesterday where essentially, the Kraken CEO literally put out a tweet that was like, hey, look, if you guys have money on our exchange and the government tells us to freeze that shit, we're going to have to follow the law and freeze that shit. So you probably shouldn't use our services. That's just the truth. Now, again, could he have been nicer the way he painted that picture? Absolutely. Does that warrant a complaint by OSC to the police? I really don't think so. And in fact, this seems like a huge overreach and again, should be a real concern for all of us, because this is setting such dangerous precedents where not only like is just like disagreeing with the government an offense, but even just telling the truth but not saying it the way the government would like it to be presented, potentially also an offense. Here's an article from the Toronto Sun. Some MPs worried about bank freeze on Convoy supporters. So again, if you guys want to dive deeper into that, link in the video description down below. Now, I want to highlight this from Toronto Star, and this shows to me just the lack of good faith, at least in regards to them putting together this article. Crypto group protests court order to freeze trucker Convoy accounts, says that it cannot freeze money or prevent it from being moved. So that's what the headline reads, but literally the next line here. Independent experts say cryptocurrency group Nunchuk appears to be correct. It does not have the power to control digital wallets or access what's inside. So literally, even the experts and this is just how cryptocurrency or Bitcoin works when it's in a non-custodial account. But so literally, your article states crypto group protest court order to freeze. No, they didn't protest at all. They sent out a tweet and shared the request they got from the Canadian government saying, like, just so you guys understand, like, we literally can't do this. There's no way we can do what you're requiring of us. It'd be like asking, CIBC Bank to freeze your TD bank accounts. And you'd be like, well, that's not how that works. So I can't go freeze that. And again, just the narrative is very obvious how they're trying to frame all this. I think it's really worth reading all this. But I just want to highlight a couple points here because, again, they really take aim at the fact of like the approach Nunchuk had in regards to this, rather than actually like just explaining the facts. So at one point in time, let me just find it here. But Nunchuk essentially stated that hey, this isn't how this works. So in an email to the court on Friday, following the injunction, Nunchuk wrote, "Please look up how self-custody and private keys work. When the Canadian dollar becomes worthless, we will be here to serve you too." So is that tongue-in-cheek? Absolutely. But does that qualify as a crypto group protesting in order to freeze trucker Convoy accounts? No. They're just saying, literally, we can't do that. Maybe you guys should research this shit before you make a request that's impossible. Again, just wild, in my opinion. Now, let's move on to Tamara Lich, and essentially the fact that she is one of the Convoy organizers. She had her day in court and was denied bail as a judge notes grave nature of charge. So again, I'll leave you guys to go down your own rabbit hole, but it really seems like she's been charged with inciting mischief, and this constitutes a grave charge, and she can't be released out on bail, which is interesting because if we go look at things a little bit deeper, the judge that actually made this decision is a former Liberal MP, that was endorsed by Justin Trudeau. And I can't help but feel like, again, under the best case scenario, this is just an unfortunate sequence of events that's going to make more people question our government and our judicial system. And under the worst case scenario, this is going to be a huge red pill or black pill for people. They're going to be like, well, why wouldn't you get a judge that we could easily feel is impartial rather than a former MP that Justin Trudeau also actively endorsed when she was running? So again, I'll let you guys go down your own rabbit hole here. But I think there's also a good point here that Laurie Goldstein makes from the Toronto Sun. Tamara Lich denied bail. David Alexander Zergak got it. Those who know. So again, remember David. He's the guy that purposely hit 4 protesters in Winnipeg with his vehicle. Within 72 hours, he was granted bail. Tamara Lich, who organized a protest that the government doesn't like, that the government states is illegal, is considered too great of a risk to be allowed out on bail. So again, one guy literally hit people with his cars on purpose, and another lady organized people to use Ottawa as a parking lot. And if you want to go down some further rabbit holes here in this tweet, one of the commenters essentially highlighted she could get 10 years, but if she molested a child, she could help Liberals in Ontario maybe build the school curriculum. If you don't know what this is referring to, he actually shares a link here to an article. This is true. You can also look it up on Wikipedia if you'd rather. But this is referring to a former Liberal politician who was jailed for child porn, who was released on early parole. So again, this was Benjamin Levin. So again, feel free to Google his name and look at it, but understand that literally, I believe he was sentenced to 3 years, if I remember correctly, for child porn, but he was let out after 3 months, if I'm not mistaken, on parole. So again, it's very interesting to see where we focus our energies, right? In the past, didn't we have that terrorist that Justin Trudeau gave $10 million to? Yeah. It's interesting how we choose to spend our money and who we decide to focus on punishing as Canadian government. Now, on a brighter side of things, I want to highlight a new protest that's kind of forming, or a new movement that you likely haven't heard of. This one's from True North. So Canadian veteran begins protest march from Vancouver to Ottawa. So again, I think this is just interesting. It's worth keeping a watch on. I haven't gone down a deep rabbit hole into James Topp or exactly what he's doing, but he's going to be embarking on like a 4,400 kilometer walk or march to essentially protest everything that's going on right now. And when asked if the Emergencies Act is discouraging towards him or making him want to stop his march, he said no. In fact, it only has strengthened or steeled his resolve. So again, link in the video description down below if you guys want to learn more about that. But let's get into our first blue pill story of the day. So this is from the Western Standard. Average house price in Canada hit $748,450. Now, you guys can go look and see what the average Canadian family's income is. But spoiler alert, it's like a tenth of this. It's 10% of this. So literally, we're seeing a 10x on the average Canadian's income in order compared to what the average Canadian home is. This is completely unsustainable, and this is completely driven by terrible fiat monetary policies being enacted by the Bank of Canada and supported by the Canadian government. But inflation is all the rage right now in every newspaper. This is from the Toronto Sun. Inflation changing the way Canadians buy groceries, polls say. So the survey also says 46% are moving to cheaper brands, 35% are reducing buying meat, and 21% are taking home less fresh fruits and vegetables. The data also says 62% are dining out for food less, while 1/4 are drinking less alcohol. So we're already seeing austerity hitting the average Canadian. And if you guys actually pay for your own food, it'll come as no surprise that, yeah, shit's getting a lot more expensive. And understand that when people are getting this pressure in regards to the cost of food, they're actually choosing less healthy options, right? They're buying less fruits, less fresh fruits and vegetables, less meat, which means they're buying more processed shit, which again is only going to actually impact our health system in a more negative way. Again, this is all driven by poor monetary policy. And this is where when I talk about, low time preference versus high time preference, right now we've got a economic system and model set up here with fiat monetary policy that literally incentivizes short-term thinking or high time preference behavior, which means that essentially our monetary policy is training a generation of Canadians to not be able to pass the marshmallow test. If you guys aren't familiar with the marshmallow test, go Google it. But essentially it's the idea of you sit down, a 3-year-old, a toddler, put a marshmallow in front of them, and you're like, hey, I'm going to leave the room for 2 minutes. If you don't eat this marshmallow, when I come back, I'll give you another marshmallow and you'll now have 2 marshmallows. So again, our monetary policy literally drives short-term thinking and bad behavior for the average citizen. This is from CBC News. Everything inflation. It's not just gas and food anymore, and wages aren't keeping up. So again, it's just another highlight of how Canadians are being squeezed. You can also see what's going on in regards to core inflation. Now, understand, as we've discussed on multiple episodes in the past, I already don't trust the CPI numbers, and I believe they are manipulated by the government. We've actually showcased it in one previous episode. You guys can dive back. I think that was in week 2, way back when the show was brand new. But again, link to the video description down below. Now, this article is actually even weirder, in my opinion. The Globe and Mail, Frito-Lay, Loblaw dispute over price increases alter some grocery store chip aisles. So essentially, there seems to be a standoff right now between Loblaws, which represents about 30% of grocery stores in Canada, and Frito-Lay. And understand, Frito-Lay isn't just like the potato chip company, right? It's Pepsi Cola, Quaker, Frito-Lay. That's the giant conglomerate, right? So these are 2 massive corporations that are fighting over prices because essentially Frito-Lay is saying hey, you have to raise the prices on our chips, and Loblaws is saying they're not going to do it. I suspect that there's even more to this story rather than just inflation, because I can't fully compute why Loblaws would be holding such a hard line in the sand in regards to raising prices on a product if, the supplier is saying so. Maybe we'll see a lot more store name brands being rolled out in Loblaws, and maybe this turns out to be not just an inflation argument, but again, link in the video description down below if you guys want to go down that rabbit hole. And then just want to highlight this from CTV News. I haven't seen anything come out really breaking down exactly what went on, but Ottawa's Rideau Centre Mall reopens following police investigation and arrest. So I saw some reports on Twitter that apparently there was a potential like gunman at the mall. I haven't seen any confirmation of that, so that seems to be likely just a rumor. They do discuss in this article that at some point in time the power went out, at least in a couple stores or maybe a section of the mall, and security guards were telling people they needed to leave the mall immediately, and then police entered with weapons drawn. So again, I'm sure by tomorrow we'll have a much better understanding of what's going on, or if you guys have already heard how this wrapped up or ended, let me know in that comment section. And then finally, the last blue pill that was kind of weird. I wanted to share with you. This is from Vice News. And if you want to see essentially what the blue pills really think of the trucker protest, this is an excellent article because it's so obvious, the divide in our country and our perspectives. And I disagree with a lot of the Vice coverage here and their framing of what's going on. But again, I encourage you guys to go read the article to understand the other side. Now, let's move on to a red pill. And arguably, this could be a black pill, but I had so many black pills already that I decided to call it a red pill. And at this point in time, I think most of us suspect that Epstein didn't actually kill himself, or at least he was probably motivated and helped, or someone helped facilitate him taking his own life. But Epstein's pal suicide leaves just Ghislaine Maxwell standing. My reaction is one of total shock and bewilderment, her brother said. This is not shocking at all, in my opinion. It's fascinating that, in the last, since COVID, essentially, we've seen Epstein commit suicide. We've seen now this man, Brunel, commit suicide. Jean Brunel, I think his name was. And we've seen Ghislaine on trial and found guilty. I don't believe she's been sentenced yet. And then we just saw Prince Andrew settle out of court for over $10 million in regards to a claim of sexual abuse from a minor. And what I will say is interesting is even the way they frame this. Because I think that, we're talking about pedophiles here, right? People that took advantage of young, impressionable girls. And that's probably best case scenario is framing it as they took advantage of. Some of the darker claims are far darker than that, but I'll let you guys go down your own rabbit hole. But this is, I'm just going to read the first couple sentences here because I can't believe that you would frame this way. The coterie of creeps who surrounded billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein in his debauched heyday has shrunk by one more. Like his buddy Jean-Luc Brunel, had a penchant for fresh blossoms of youth. The longtime French modeling agent discovered runway superstars, and it listed some runway superstars. So again, listen to this. Like his buddy Jean-Luc Brunel, had a penchant for the fresh blossoms of youth. Is that how we're framing pedophiles now and people that take advantage of minors? Because I could think of a lot of other adjectives or ways to frame that sentence that doesn't make it sound like, he had a couple, maybe he strayed once or twice, but no big deal, bro. No, this is a huge fucking deal. And again, this is another situation where magically there was no cameras on his cell when he committed suicide, just like how Epstein had, essentially 3 cameras fail in regards that were on his cell in regards to catching the moment. And again, reminder, Epstein's guards both happened to fall asleep when he committed suicide. At this point in time, and there's a great episode of The Unraveling, a podcast by Jocko Willnick and Daryl Cooper, one of their most recent episodes, where they break it down, and they've got a great point when they're breaking down. At this point in time, there's too many coincidences. The burden of proof isn't on the average person that suspects something's a foul at this point in time. No, the burden of proof is actually on the government and the institutions to prove that this crazy sequence, almost an impossible sequence of events, were just coincidences. But anyways, if you guys want to read the article, link in the video description down below. But again, I just can't believe the way they decided to lead into that story. Like tongue-in-cheek. It's fucking disgusting. True North, Trudeau government gives $10 million to race-based housing. And this is just, a sign of the times, I suppose. The program will provide $10 million in taxpayer money to the Black North Home Ownership Bridge program, along with a joint contribution of $40 million with Habitat for Humanity to create 200 additional home ownership opportunities for Black Canadians, as part of a recently announced $50 million investment through the National Housing Co-Investment Fund to support Black Canadian renters. So what we're looking at here is $50 million in order to create 200 additional home ownership opportunities. So, let's do some real quick math there, but that works out to $400,000 per household in order to create this opportunity for 200 additional home ownership for homeowners for Black Canadians. And this identity politics is dangerous. We should not want this as part of our society. Again, we shouldn't be filtering through the lens of race, in my opinion. And my question is, how do you determine if someone's Black enough for this program? Are you literally going to have a color swatch and you just hold it up against their skin? Are you going to have them do a 23andMe in order to figure out their ancestry? Would the rapper say Logic, who's biracial, but arguably looks white, or he raps about it all the time, would he count because he had a Black father, but he kind of looks white? Again, is this the country that we want to live in? Again, I'm not saying that we can't have programs again, in a perfect world, I'd live in a much more libertarian society where we would slash taxes and we'd slash social programs. But if we are going to live in a society with social programs, shouldn't they more just be driven upon those that need versus than focusing on identity politics? Again, I just not my cup of tea, and definitely a red pill in my opinion. Now, this is from Timcast. Arizona House Committee passes bill to make filming police illegal. Now, this is sort of true. It's not quite as bad as it sounds, but again, I don't like the precedent that we're entering. So originally, when they tried to pass this bill in Arizona, it was you could not film a police officer who's in the process of arresting someone or doing his job without his permission, or you had to be at least 15 feet away. Now, on the surface, this doesn't necessarily sound like a big deal, but understand, we're going to get into debates now where, again, cops are going to be like, get that camera out of my face, like we saw yesterday in Canada when I shared that with you. We're going to see people saying, he was within 15 feet, so he deserved to be arrested, and we're just going to find ourselves on a slippery slope here. We should always be promoting and pushing for accountability. Now, if you're literally getting in the way of a lawful action by a police officer, we've already got rules and regulations in order to hold those individuals accountable, right? I'm forgetting the name right now, but essentially if they're interfering with a lawful arrest, you can already charge them under the existing laws. There should be no concern about people filming police officers. And in fact, we should all want more transparency and more accountability. Now, let's move on to a black pill. And this is interesting. So we're going to go down a little bit more of the WEF, the World Economic Forum rabbit hole. And so first of all, I want to give a shout out to Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, who put out this statement. I think that this was probably from a while ago, but again, it's worth repeating. The reason I'm saying it's probably from a while ago is because there's a Christmas tree behind him. But then we're going to bring up essentially how recently it came up in Parliament debate, and literally the House Speaker just pretended like, oh, you're breaking up, we can't hear you. Let's just move on to the next question. But first, let's listen to what Jason Kenney had to say.
I'm not going to be taking any policy direction from Klaus Schwab or his ilk. And what I find offensive, look, the so-called Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory. It is a actual set of concrete proposals being advocated by some very influential people, and including apparently by Prime Minister Trudeau, who clearly alluded to it, referred to it, quoted from it, the Schwab theory, in a speech he gave to the United Nations a couple of months ago. So it's not a conspiracy theory to talk about that. Those are the folks advocating it. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for democratically elected leaders, for me to say, heck no, we're not going to exploit or take advantage of a crisis to advance a political agenda. And so, no, I'm not going to be taking any.
So again, everything he said there, completely true. At this point in time, like, there's a book that Klaus Schwab has written now called the Great Reset, which is a set of policies that he's promoting that all globalist leaders from, his Young Leader, World Economic Forum's Young Leader Group or whatever, push. He's bragged in the past about how he's got more than 50% penetration of Justin Trudeau's cabinet. And again, we covered that in the one special episode I did about 2 weeks ago. Encourage you guys to go watch that if you want to go further down. But this is from the Post Millennial. Cabinet ministers dodge question on Trudeau's lies to World Economic Forum. And while this isn't part of the clip here, understand that after the question gets asked and essentially just like ignored or denied or moved on by the House Speaker, then what happens is an NDP MP actually speaks out and says, that's misinformation. Turns out that MP is also a World Economic Forum member. So just, again, this article is worth reading, but let's just listen to this clip.
I had a constituent that wanted me to ask a question about outside interference to our democracy. Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum, and he bragged how his subversive WEF, World Economic Forum, has, quoted, infiltrated governments around the world. He said that his organization had penetrated more than half of Canada's cabinet. And I was wondering, in the interest of transparency, could the member please name which cabinet ministers are on board with the WEF's agenda? My concern is the deputy.
Order. I know that the member was in a really good question there, but the audio is really bad and the video is really bad as well. And I apologize. I don't know if the member. Okay, let's try again. The honorable member for Timmins James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, that member was promoting open disinformation. That's not.
So again, literally, like it sounded perfectly clear to me. And then in the more extended clip, they just move on. They don't give him the opportunity to re-ask the question. This is the actions of banana republics and tin pot dictators. This isn't how democracies should act. And now let's just hit upon the Globe and Mail. The Ottawa truck convoy has revealed the ugly side of freedom. Freedom is never ugly, in my opinion. But this is written by Beverly McLaughlin, who is a former justice of the Supreme Court of Canada and served as Chief Justice from 2000 to 2017. Now, again, even if she had the best of intentions writing this article, and I encourage you guys, it's worth reading, because I understand, like, she had a lot of power over Canada. And she believes that the Ottawa truck convoy has revealed the ugly side of freedom. And one of the things she touches upon is how freedom can mean different things to different people. And she's like, freedom to do what? Where do my freedoms end and the freedoms of others begin? I would argue that, and a lot of anarchists and libertarians and minarchists have explored this at length. You could look towards Murray Rothbard's Anatomy of the State, Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, and all sorts of other treatises that have been put together by Austrian economists and libertarians. And it's not that hard to understand, right? One of the biggest things is freedom from interference, I meant. And in regards to this, that's what a lot of the anti-mandate protesters, not the anti-vaccine protesters, as the government and mainstream media would like to paint them, but the actual anti-mandate protesters were protesting, is freedom from interference from the government, forcing vaccine mandates, forcing restricted mobility rights, right, and things of that nature. In fact, understand the United States, when they set up their constitutional republic, it was very focused and driven on making sure the government couldn't overstep. We've discussed this in the past, but essentially there's that famous quote that a democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner, and a constitutional republic is a well-armed lamb debating the vote, right? And that's important right now. Again, even if it's the tyranny of the majority, it's still tyranny, right? And while a lot of the individuals that support right now the tyranny of the majority in Canada, they will pretend that they care about minorities. The smallest minority is the minority of one, the individual. And I believe that we should hold up individual rights and freedoms as paramount to the success, to the abundance, to the wonderfulness that we've experienced in the West over the last 100 years, across all the different democracies and republics. And this last black pill here, this is from the Western Standard. Rubenstein, CBC working to entrench residential school misinformation. So I really do think this is worth reading in full length. It's a complicated subject matter. I think educating Canadians about, I don't know what else to say, the stain on Canada's history of the residential school system is absolutely worthwhile. And in fact, there's a lot of lessons that I wish we would have learned more thoroughly, because I don't think we would find ourselves on this slippery slope to tyranny right now had we actually learned those lessons rather than just paying lip service to them. However, what this article really is taking aim at is the framing that essentially the residential school system was the same as the Holocaust. And again, I think that that's probably a bit of a stretch, and it almost is a disservice to even discussing the residential school system. We should be able to talk about it in a vacuum, focusing on it and not having to draw in parallels, right? Like, and I think one of my biggest frustrations about what's gone on over the last few years is, we see these Every Child Matter protests and things like that. For a day, people wear orange and pat themselves on the back about how progressive they are. But yet we haven't actually started digging up the potential grave sites, right? We haven't actually been trying to get to the bottom of what the hell went on. We haven't actually been doing full-fledged investigations into everything that has transpired or like came to light over even just the last few months and years. I can't help but feel like we're continuing to do a disservice to Canada and Indigenous people by not just actually being like, fuck it, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're actually going to get you fresh water, drinkable water. Like, these are all very solvable problems. And I find it very frustrating that instead it feels like we just want to keep bringing them up as talking points or as photo ops for the Prime Minister and other politicians to take advantage of. But yeah, that's my hot take on it. Let's move on to, I think I've got a couple clown pills now for us. So this first one, this is interesting. This could be a black pill if you'd rather call it a black pill, but I'm calling it a clown pill. Do you guys really ever look into Elon Musk's ex-wife, Grimes, the musician? There's some weird stuff if you actually start like picking away at the surface. So I found this interesting Twitter thread. So Elon's ex, Grimes, musician, who said AI is the fastest way to communism, posted the picture below on her Instagram in September 2019. Click on the big zoomed in one first. The others are just for confirmation. So again, very just interesting. Essentially, it looks like it's kind of like a Rosetta Stone or a hieroglyph here. And we can see there's different symbols and things like that. But the one they're kind of highlighting here appears to be like a DNA sequence, a virus, plus 3 needles, and then equaling a spaceship, which I honestly don't even know what that means, but interesting. And the timing of it's interesting as well. But then as you go down the rabbit hole a bit further on these conspiracy theories, and I'm more than happy to call it conspiracy theory at this point in time, you'll see that she released this music video where everyone's wearing face masks. But again, this is back in September of 2019. This video went live. Also, an argument that some conspiracy theorists make is everyone's 6 feet apart in the video, so they're kind of preemptively social distancing. So again, just weird. I'll let you guys go down your own clown pill on that, but it is bizarre. And I'd never listened to her music before someone kind of put this on my radar. And her music in and of itself is fascinating. So I encourage you guys to go listen, if to nothing else, to that video and that music. And then here's one last clown pill for you guys. And for those of you that are complaining about how Vancouver and Toronto is too expensive, well, good news. Hopefully soon you'll be able to do as these individuals in LA are doing, which is rent out a tent in your backyard for $2,200 a month on Airbnb. So again, you know what? Who cares if the average house in Toronto is over $1 million? Just slap up a tent in your backyard and rent it out on Airbnb for a couple $1,000s a month, and hopefully you can make your mortgage payment. All right. As I mentioned, I was kind of black-pilled when I was putting together today's stories, so I don't have a white pill. I don't have a meme of the day, but you guys let me know in the comment section, what are some white pill stories that are giving you hope in these unusual times in Canada? What are some memes that have been having you laugh out loud? And as always, reminder, link in the video description down below to the Problems or Profits Discord. In there, you guys can actually find a channel dedicated to the Maple Pill. Share with me any stories you want me to cover, any conspiracy theories you want me to look into, any memes that you think should be featured on the show. And yeah, that's it for tonight's show. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate everyone jumping in the comment section. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I appreciate you guys. And again, as always, know you're not alone. In fact, that's what they want from us, right? They want us to feel scared, alone, isolated, filled with fear. But if anything, I believe that what we've seen over the course of, the last few weeks with the Trucker Freedom Convoy protest is the fact that a lot more people are frustrated with what's going on in this world, right? I didn't get a chance to cover it today, but we saw Britain essentially completely opening up and learning to live with COVID. We've even seen narratives coming out of like communist California stating that they understand now that this is endemic and that society is going to have to live with it. So fingers crossed, someday Canada will also catch the plot and we'll start moving in the right direction. Until then, try not get your bank account frozen. Appreciate you guys, and I'll play out the intro. There we go.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Web fire, math, evil scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it.